Hey, good afternoon. 506 here. News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we are making sense of the news. You can join us today, 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL.
You're gambling with World War III. And what you're doing is very disrespectful to the country, this country. It's
with
back
all
to
respect
you.
to your
Far
country.
more than a lot of people said they
respect.
should have.
Have you said thank you once?
A lot of times.
No, in this
Even
entire meeting,
today.
have you said thank
Even
you?
today.
You went to Pennsylvania and campaigned for the opposition in October. Offer some words of appreciation for the United States of America and the president who's trying to save your country.
A fiery conversation on camera on Friday between Volodymyr Zelenskyy, the Ukrainian president, and the American president and American vice president. Here to give us her assessment of what went down is Miranda Devine, columnist for the New York Post, author of The Big Guy, How a President and His Son Sold Out America. That was the last guy. Hey, Miranda, good to have you back with us.
Hi, Vince. Great to be with you.
Okay, so what was Zelenskyy thinking?
Well, I mean, does he think? He was so rude and so moronic and brutish in that Oval Office meeting. It's hard to really fathom what goes on in his mind unless he was put up to it, as my colleague Michael Goodwin thinks, by the Democrats, people like Chris Murphy, who's a protege of Joe Biden, or various Europeans. I mean, the Europeans now are in a total panic because they know that even with all of them, 500 million of them, compared to 300 million Americans, they don't have the military wherewithal to defend Ukraine. And so they need America. They understand they need America. And basically, Donald Trump offered Zelenskyy and Ukraine the best deal they are ever going to get. And he's been negotiating with Putin behind the scenes.
Yes.
And he intimates that he's got Putin to agree to at least start talking about concessions. And you have to make compromises. And Zelenskyy was just there so rude on Friday, telling the president, no compromises, no ceasefire.
Yes.
This deal is 2%, when Donald Trump had just told him this deal is 98%. And I just think he has bad motivations. They're not good for Ukraine.
Yes.
Ukrainians want the war over.
Do you think that Volodymyr Zelenskyy may have believed his own fiction? In other words, like he kind of bought into the idea that he was some international celebrity, superstar. He could do no wrong. He's the leader of the free world. Everything he touches turns to gold. Had he convinced himself of that, so much so that he shows up to the Oval Office of the United States and then treats the president like that disrespectfully?
Yeah, probably, because, he's an actor. He cosplays a soldier in his army fatigues. That was so rude to show up to the White House dressed like that, especially when he was told to wear a suit, and especially when he has worn a suit when he's met with various personages from the WEF, or, Europeans. So it was, I guess, deliberate disrespect. And he is an actor. You can tell the way he comports himself that he's playing a role.
Yes.
And that role, I guess, that he's cast for himself and that was cast for him by the Biden administration and various stupid bureaucrats, is that he is a wartime hero. And, as long as every last Ukrainian dies, that will be his epitaph. Oh. He hasn't done anything for Ukraine. And this fantasy that he has that Putin's going to start invading NATO countries like Poland and the Baltic states, it's a fact, he told Donald Trump, and there are going to be American soldiers embroiled in war. And Trump just said, enough. Just stop it. Don't tell us what's going to happen.
Well, if Zelenskyy got his way, that is a guarantee for American soldiers to be embroiled in war. He just said over the weekend that the only circumstance that he is prepared to leave the presidency is if Ukraine joins NATO. What happens if Ukraine joins NATO, Miranda?
Well, it's not going to happen. And Donald Trump has ruled it out, and so has everybody. The only people that sort of tantalizingly offered a sort of a half sort of secret offer to Zelenskyy was Biden and Kamala Harris. Remember, on the eve of the war, Kamala Harris goes to Munich, I think, and she gives this speech and basically inviting Ukraine to come into NATO at some point, making it a possibility. I mean, it couldn't have been a more provocative thing to say. And she just reads from a script. She didn't come up with that herself. So that was a Biden administration deliberate provocation to start the war, knowing, as the CIA had told everybody, that Putin had troops amassed on the border. So I don't know really what the motivation is, but whenever it comes to Ukraine and anything to do with Joe Biden and his family, it's always dirty business.
So how much of all of this is just the globalist left, and especially the federal government, the United States federal government establishment, not willing to admit how badly they've screwed up Ukrainian policy over the last decade? Because I just played audio a moment ago of Senator Chris Murphy, and he's as big of an insane person as you can get. Back in 2014, he was sitting on C-SPAN bragging that the American government was involved in overthrowing the Yanukovych government in Ukraine, which at the time was friendly to Russia. The United States orchestrates an overthrow of that government. And since then, it's been the invasion of Crimea. It's been the invasion under Joe Biden. It's been human suffering. And yet the left is like full on dead end. We've got to keep doing this. How much of this is they just don't want to admit that they screwed up?
Well, I guess you have to look at their mentality. Do they actually think they screwed up? You look at how arrogant and confident they still are. From their point of view, they don't care if 1 million people have died. They don't care if everyone dies in Ukraine. Their aim is that they weaken Russia. And they have just some sort of a paranoia about Russia that they've talked themselves into. I think in part it is to divert American attention away from China, which is the real threat. And China is eating our lunch as opposed to Joe Biden saying it wasn't. Yes. And a lot of people, especially a lot of Democrats, are making a lot of money out of China. Biden family made a lot of money out of China, and Ukraine. But as long as we concentrate on Russia, which has a GDP, I think, smaller than Italy's. I mean, it's not a threat, and it's a nuclear power. Why do you want to provoke a nuclear power? As Donald Trump said the other day, there's been a lot of provocative actions from the Democrats in all their Russia hoax. And I argue this latest one with the Zelenskyy meeting is their fourth Russia hoax. Right. They're calling Trump a Putin puppet because he's trying to get peace. Yeah. But all of this is very provocative. And as Trump said, well, Putin put up with all of that and we didn't go to war over it. So that says something.
Yes, and I think that's another big piece I think you've tapped into, which is that the left likes bringing up Russia because it's a part of their anti-Trump cinematic universe. Like it's always like, we've got to talk about Russia. And then they always have to figure out a way to say that Trump is cozying up to Putin because that fits into their prior assessment, which is that the only way Donald Trump could possibly win a presidential election is if Vladimir Putin willed it into existence. It does seem that that's part of the mental illness we're seeing.
Yeah, I think you're right. The Trump derangement syndrome goes along with Russia derangement syndrome. And you would think that by now they would have realized their playbook is tattered and torn and doesn't work anymore. We saw it with the Steele dossier, the Mueller investigation, all of it. Donald Trump was cleared. The impeachment, where he was impeached for the sins of Joe Biden, Zelenskyy involved again. And then, of course, the laptop trial and the 51 CIA guys who lied and said that it was Russian disinformation. And so that was, the third Russia hoax, and now the fourth is that because Trump is trying to stop the deaths in Ukraine, and therefore he has to talk to both sides in the conflict, that he's Putin's puppet. I mean, how destructive and damaging do you have to be? What kind of a psychopath do you have to be that you would be willing to sabotage a peace deal just for your base political Trump derangement syndrome?
Well, as long as the war goes on in Ukraine, they will not hold elections. There are no elections. They say the war is on, so we have martial law, therefore no elections. And Zelenskyy this weekend said that he expects the war will continue for a very, very long time. That was his assessment, which
Yeah.
which led me to believe, wait a second, isn't he saying that I intend to stay in power without an election for a very, very long time?
Yes, and I think that statement was in that same interview that he did in, I think, in the UK, Sky UK, in which he was asked about elections, and he said, in a roundabout way, that it was undemocratic to force him to have an election. And I think in that context was when he said, the war is going to be around for a very, very long time, which of course Donald Trump picked up today and just excoriated Zelenskyy, who is the obstacle to peace. I don't think that the Ukrainians can stick with Zelenskyy.
Yeah.
And the generals there, I'm sure, are coming to the end of their tether with him. I'm not sure if you noticed, but when he was in London over the weekend meeting with the Prime Minister there, Keir Starmer, there was a very tall, imposing-looking Ukrainian who's the ambassador to the UK from Ukraine, who was the hero general for the first 3 years of the war. And he fell out with Zelenskyy, and he was so popular that Zelenskyy couldn't bump him off like he has other people. And instead, he sort of exiled him to London. Well, he was interviewed recently, and he said just a couple of days ago, he said if there were elections, he would consider putting his hat in the ring. And I think he's a prime candidate to replace Zelenskyy. And that would be a good thing, I think, if the generals who fought, heroically were involved in this peace deal. It's sort of this two-bit comedian who really, I think, just from his jerky mannerisms and his incredible influence, I don't think has the emotional wherewithal to deal with what we're going through at the moment.
Finally, Miranda Devine, what do you think of President Trump's strategy here? He made a conscious decision on Friday to eject Zelenskyy from the White House. He said, get out of here. We're not signing a deal. And Zelenskyy ends up unceremoniously flying home. What do you think of the president's moves here, and what might they produce?
Well, if you watch the whole Oval Office meeting, it was 43 minutes of Zelenskyy being rude and provocative and saying, demanding things from America, security guarantees, no ceasefire, I'm not going to compromise, making Donald Trump look at photographs of prisoners of war, the whole thing. And Trump was so polite and so nice and so cordial throughout the whole process. And as Scott Bessent said, if Zelenskyy had issues and disagreements with Trump, he could have waited 15 minutes until they were having lunch down the hall, the 16 of them, and brought them up there. But he gratuitously did that. He insulted America.
Yes.
He insulted Trump. And finally, J.D. Vance had enough. And then when Zelenskyy starts being incredibly rude to J.D. Vance, it's said that he muttered bitch under his, excuse the language, in Ukrainian under his breath. That was when Donald Trump stepped in to defend J.D. Vance. He said, he's not shouting. And you don't hold the cards.
Yeah.
You should have a little thankful about what we've done. I mean, look, America does not need Ukraine's rare earths. Australia has more rare earths. So does Canada, and they're a lot easier to access. Australia's already mining them.
Yes.
So America can get rare earths from these friendly allies. They don't have to go to a place that's at war, that's hard to access, that has no infrastructure, that no one can want to live in.
Yeah.
He's doing Ukraine a favor, and anyone with half a brain understands that.
Yeah, well, apparently he didn't bring it with him as he showed up in Washington. Hey, thank you very much, Miranda Devine. Good to talk to you as always.
You too, Vince.
The great Miranda Devine at the New York Post. It's 5:20. All right, let us see. I've got Keith calling in from Colorado, line 7. Keith, you're on the Vince Coglianese Show. Hello, sir. Hello, Keith.
My only comment was, how you doing? Good show.
Thank you.
Yeah, you made the comment about the fact that because of this Ukrainian-Russian conflict that we're building a very seasoned, battle-tested Russian army.
Yes.
Fair enough. The other point is, for the past 3 years, we've severely degraded the Russian army. We've killed, wounded 800,000 men. We've destroyed I don't know how many weapons and equipment. So that's just a countervailing point of view.
That is, I mean, it would be a countervailing point of view. The only problem with it, Keith, is that Russia's military is now bigger and stronger than it was before the invasion of Ukraine. It's grown in strength since then. And that's the assessment of U.S. military generals who say, General James Hecker is a reporter, United States Air Force, is a general. He's with the United States Air Forces in Europe and Africa. And he said that, quote, Russia is getting larger and they're getting better than they were before. They're actually larger than they were when the invasion kicked off, he said. And he just said that in September of this past year. That's the assessment, is that Russia's military has grown in size. And here's another simple mathematics point. Right, Russia has about 70 million men. Ukraine has about 37 million people. In other words, Russia has twice as many men as Ukraine has people. And that's an environment where, it just as a simple mathematics thing, that they're not meaningfully degraded. There's just no way Ukraine would ever win this war.
Well, you're talking about 70 million men in total population in Russia or in the army. I mean, Russia's famous for the policy of attrition. They just throw bodies and bodies and bodies, and they all die. They don't care.
That's right. Exactly right. I'm agreeing with you on that subject. They've got the human capital, and they will waste it without concern for the life. But the military, according to the assessments, stronger now than even before the invasion. So this hasn't worked. This has not been a good investment, like Eric Swalwell claims. So this is a great investment. No, it's actually going just about as badly as it possibly could go. Thank you, Keith. I appreciate the call, sir. But Keith is right to assess that point. That's exactly the kind of thing you'd want to look at. Okay, is there anything here? Can we take away anything from this? Assess that, maybe we did degrade them? No, we didn't actually. It's just been a total failure. Their currency's been strengthened. Their military's bigger than ever. And we've been funding just endless bloodshed in that country. And again, President Trump would like to stop it, which makes a lot of sense. Hey, good afternoon to you. It's 5:35. News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. You can help us sort it all out at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. Well, first it was Fort Bragg. Now Fort Benning, Georgia, has returned. Fort Benning is back, which was for a time changed to Fort Moore. We can't call it Benning anymore. We got to change the name of everything. New York Times today, Pete Hegseth revives the old name of another military base. But even in the headline, they get it completely wrong. It's not the old name. It's a new name, it turns out, once again. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth continues his efforts to revive the Confederate names of military bases. Again, not what he's doing. Announcing on Monday that he is renaming Fort Moore, whose previous name honored the Confederate General Henry Benning. The base, which is in Georgia, will again be called Fort Benning. Those are the first two paragraphs. Now, get ready for the explainer as to what's going on here. The base's name was changed in 2023 as a part of a wider bipartisan effort to eliminate military honors bestowed on Confederate officers who rebelled against the Union during the Civil War. Mr. Hegseth views those changes as a part of a woke culture and wants to return the bases back to their old names. Current law does not let him do that. They're right about this. The current law says this, that the military is no longer allowed to name bases after Confederate generals. So Mr. Hegseth has found other military troops with the same last names. Oh. So once again, in other words, he's not naming them after Confederates. He's naming the bases after well-agreed-upon American heroes. Last month, he announced that Fort Liberty in North Carolina would return to the name Fort Bragg, but in honor of an enlisted Army soldier named Roland L. Bragg, who fought in World War II, and not the Confederate General Braxton Bragg. On Monday, it was Fort Moore's turn. Quote, I direct the U.S. Army to change the name of Fort Moore, Georgia, to Fort Benning, Georgia, in honor of Corporal Fred G. Benning, who served with extraordinary heroism during World War I with the United States Army, and in recognition of the installation's storied history of service to the United States of America, said Mr. Hegseth in a statement. Corporal Benning, he said, was awarded the Distinguished Service Cross for his extraordinary heroism on the battlefield in France in 1918 for leading his company through heavy fire to its assigned objective. Pretty amazing. So wonderful. So here's what's happened. I know there were people who were like, well, just change it back to the original name. By law, he can't. So Pete Hegseth and President Trump have come up with a workaround, which is let's name it after somebody else. Same last name, but somebody else. You going to object to World War I and World War II heroes getting these honors now? Fort Liberty, come on. There has to be somebody we can name them after. And so now we have a Fort Bragg and a Fort Benning again. And importantly, just like I said when Fort Bragg was restored, that name, these bases, the importance of their names are not previously their Confederate namesakes. Fundamentally, the importance of the names are that they accurately reflect the history of the people who made history on those bases. It's for the troops who have served there, for the soldiers, in the case of these Army bases, who have served there. It's about them. It's about the years of their life that they gave in service to their country at Fort Bragg or at Fort Benning, a place that they called home, a place where they shared their service with their fellow soldier. When we talk about, it has been, certainly, up until the left tried to demonize all of this, when we talk about these bases and their names, it's always been within the context of the troops who have served there. Restoring those bases is a way to make it so that these troops, when they dwell upon their time and their service, and when we dwell upon their time and their service, and we refer to places like Fort Benning and Fort Bragg, we're referring to real places that are really called that, where troops really served because they love their country and they volunteered to serve for it. That's what this is about. And the left tried to get in the middle of that. And President Trump, in his effort to right the ship, is figuring out a way to correct all of it. This is healing, very healing. And it's nice to see Secretary Hegseth do this. He is, just like the rest of these guys, they've all been in there, right? They've been... This is so much better than Trump 1, I got to be honest, than Trump 45. Trump 47 has been fantastic because everybody's a bit more battle-hardened now. They're all ready for the fight. They know how tough this fight can and will be. And they're not asking for little things. They're asking for big things. They want to make big changes and quickly. And the left doesn't even know how to deal with the full frontal assault. They have no idea. It's a full court press, and Trump is dominating at every turn, scoring bucket after bucket. And this is another example of that. So we have a Fort Benning again, and we have a Fort Bragg again. Rick is calling in from Reston now, line 2. Rick, good afternoon. You are on the Vince Coglianese Show.
Hey, Vince. Great show. Thanks for taking my call.
Thank you.
I've got an older brother and sister who were born in 58 and 60 in Fort Hood, Texas Army Hospital. Mm-hmm. And so they don't really have a place where they were born anymore because they changed the name. And I was kind of hoping they could find someone with the last name of Hood, of all the millions of service people that served and served valiantly, and maybe get that one changed back too. I think that'd be great.
Fort Hood. Yeah, I don't even really, not in my head at least, I don't have a full list of all the bases that were changed in this way, but Fort Hood is one of those. Fort Hood was named after a Confederate general. And so that's my guess, honestly, is that is on Hegseth's list, Rick. Although it has been a young administration, it hasn't been going on that long, just a little bit over a month now. It does seem like it took a couple of weeks for them to deal with Fort Bragg, and then a couple more weeks they dealt with Fort Benning, and now we'll see what happens next. Perhaps Fort Hood in Texas could be up next, and to honor the service of your family members, Rick. I think that'd be a big deal too.
And like you said, it's a cultural thing that's far, far more deep than the original namesakes when they were named that. Fort Polk would be one of them. There's a handful of other ones, but anyway, thanks for bringing the topic back up again.
My pleasure. Well, it's all credit to Secretary Hegseth for bringing it up. I just noticed it today. Thank you, Rick. It's been cool. They're all, like I said, they're all battle hardened. In fact, among the people who are battle hardened in the administration, Melania Trump, the First Lady of the United States, who has been through it. She's obviously seen her husband go through it. She had to watch in horror as her husband was shot on national television. Imagine being his wife in that circumstance. And she had her home raided by the FBI, by their political opponent, Joe Biden. She had all of her drawers rifled through, remember, inside of her home. That was and her whole family was affected in that way. And ever since then, don't you think like everybody kind of notices that there's been a very interesting attitude shift? It's almost like, right, Corey? She's like, it's almost like her John Wick moment. Like they killed her dog. And the last thing you want to do is kill Melania's dog. You don't want to do that. You don't want to do that. And so now every time she's out in public, people are like, oh, man, who's next? Who's getting Melania'd? So Melania Trump today, which you didn't really see this in the first Trump administration. She's now advocating for legislation. She went over to the Congress, to the Capitol building. She was trying to speak with members of Congress. And the goal was to pass something called the Take It Down Act. The Take It Down Act. Now, this is for what we call revenge porn. And in other words, like somebody gets sent an intimate image, especially kids. This happens among young people, but gets sent an intimate image. It's meant not for a wide audience. And then in an act of anger that the relationship concluded, decides to share it with the world as an act of some sort of demented retaliation. Melania wants to move against this. She thinks that's a bad thing. It is a bad thing. It's an awful thing. Melania Trump headed to Capitol Hill today for a roundtable discussion with members of Congress and others on a bill that would make it a federal crime to post intimate imagery online without an individual's consent and help require the swift removal of such content. And that makes sense, too, I mean, at a federal level, because you're talking about interstate commerce, these big tech companies, and trying to force them to very quickly pull this content if such a law were to come into existence, the Take It Down Act. Here's the First Lady today speaking in support of the bill.
I'm here with you today with a common goal: to protect our youth from online harm. The widespread presence of abusive behavior in the digital domain affects the daily lives of our children, families, and communities. Addressing this issue is essential for fostering a safe and supportive environment for our young people. I hope today's roundtable builds awareness of the harm caused by non-consensual intimate imagery, and eventually the approval of the Take It Down Act bill in Congress. In today's AI-driven world, the threat of privacy breaches is alarmingly high. As organizations harness the power of our data, the risk of unauthorized access and misuses of personal information escalates. We must prioritize robust security measures and uphold strict ethical standards to protect individual privacy.
Yeah, Melania's speaking about something important here because what a nightmare for families and young people especially have to deal with this. This is about standing up for girls and women, what Melania Trump is talking about. And once again, it's the right. It's conservatives who are doing that. Where's the left here? Why aren't they in on this, helping to protect girls and women? In fact, Melania Trump called them out today for that. She said, it's a real shame that Democrats did not join us for this roundtable, because how is this political?
I was heartened to learn that Senator Cruz and Senator Klobuchar united to prioritize this fundamental matter.
Well, Klobuchar, there's a Dem.
I must admit, however, I expected to see more Democrats, leaders with us here today, to address this serious issue. Surely, as adults, we can prioritize Americans' children ahead of partisan politics.
So she's saying it's pretty thin. I mean, you got Amy Klobuchar. That's something. But where's everybody else? Where are all the Democrats at? How can they not show up for this? Are they that deranged and anti-Trump that they can't show up when the First Lady of the United States says, hey, let's hold a roundtable on this subject? Crazy. And again, I think, don't you get the sense that Melania Trump has discovered a little bit more fight now? She's like, okay, you want to come at me? I'm going to call you out when you don't show up to something that is so brain dead easy to show up to. So brain dead easy. The First Lady saying today it's imperative that we safeguard the kids.
As First Lady, my commitment to the Be Best initiative underscores the importance of online safety. In an era where digital interactions are integral to daily life, it is imperative that we safeguard children from mean-spirited and hurtful online behavior.
Yeah, well, especially on a personal level. Let's put aside federal legislation on keeping kids away from mean-spirited behavior. Let's keep our kids away from all of that social network garbage as long as humanly possible. See how long you can go. Make a game out of it. You see that there are I saw something over the weekend about this. I got to find out more about this. There are Luddite organizations at like colleges and stuff. So basically young people who are so turned off by the phone culture and social media and the internet that they're voluntarily switching to flip phones and trying to disconnect from the toxic world of the internet. I think they're straight up calling themselves Luddite clubs, and they're encouraging people to join them and say, "Come in, the water's fine. We have human contact over here." It's not all based on just pictures and fake like posting to Instagram. Look how amazing my life is all the time, like constantly lying to everyone through the television show that has become your life on the internet. They're like straight up Luddite clubs. It's pretty funny, and they're proud of it. They think it's great.
Ensuring their protection is not just a responsibility, but a vital step in nurturing tomorrow's leaders.
Yeah, critically important. Critically important. The internet's a crazy place. Got to protect the kids. This is very basic stuff, which is why only conservatives are saying it, not the left. Where's AOC? She doesn't want to protect girls? It's 5:49 now. Okay. The president's set to give a big a joint address to Congress tomorrow night. And Caroline Leavitt, the White House press secretary, was just walking past what they call Pebble Beach over at the White House up to the sticks. Those are the microphones. They have words for all this stuff. It's just the White House. And she was asked by reporters about the theme. Here's what she had to say.
Welcome.
Now, let's see, 13 minutes late.
Two questions. On the speech tomorrow.
One question.
How will the speech tomorrow be different from your average President Trump speech?
Stay tuned. It's going to be must-see TV.
Stay tuned. It's going to be must-see TV. A little more detail than that now from Fox News. They report that President Trump's theme is going to be the, quote, renewal of the American dream tomorrow. It'll feature 4 main sections: accomplishments from Trump's second term thus far at home and abroad, what the Trump administration has done for the economy, the president's renewed push for Congress to pass additional funding for border security, and the president's plans for peace around the globe. It's funny that what they've accomplished so far, line, normally most presidencies, when they begin and then they do this first address to a joint session of Congress, they don't have accomplishments under their belt. It's just hello, Congress, here's what we're going to do. President Trump has an entire administration worth of accomplishments. They may as well straight up call it a State of the Union speech tomorrow, because that is, in fact, what it seems to be that he'll be delivering. So President Trump, with the big joint address to Congress tomorrow, will bring you all the available previews that we have here on all of our coverage tomorrow. That will be excellent, and we'll keep track of that. Also, here's some breaking news for you. Just happened in the last hour, maybe? New York Times headline, top FBI agent in New York City forced out after sending defiant email. The top agent at the FBI's New York field office said in an email Monday that he had been forced out of his job, fired. His departure follows clashes with Justice Department officials over the Trump administration's directives. Need I remind you that the New York field office is the place that apparently had hidden thousands of Jeffrey Epstein documents from the Attorney General, Pam Bondi. She gave a deadline of Friday at 8 a.m. Send me the documents. I want to see them. Give me every last one. And I need a report on why you've been keeping them from me in the first place. We haven't heard much since then. Well, until now. The head of the New York FBI field office just canned moments ago. We have a big speech from President Trump tomorrow. We'll be here to cover all of it right here on WMAL. The great one, Mark Levin, up next.